In this video, I'm going to give you my predictions for UFC Abu Dhabi. As always, you can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. In our main event, we have Cory Sandhagen fighting Umar Nurmagomedov. We finally get to see this fight. We've been waiting for a while. It was booked, it was canceled, Umar gets a new opponent, Sandhagen's out of action. We've been waiting for some time. But I'm glad it's here. I'm glad we have a chance to watch it because it's one of the most important fights at bantamweight today. Now, you got Cory Sandhagen, who has been one of the top bantamweights in the division for the last couple of years. For a while now, this guy has basically exclusively competed against ranked competition, former champions, title challengers. He's quietly had one of the strongest strengths of schedule we've seen in recent history. He's competed in the UFC 13 times, and along the way, he's faced guys like Mario Bautista, who's on a run, prime Marlon Moraes, Frankie Edgar, former champion, Aljamain Sterling, former champion, TJ Dillashaw, former champion, Petr Yan, former champion, Song Yadong, who's firmly in the mix, Chito Vera just competed for gold, Rob Font. It would take less time to tell you about which elite bantamweights Cory Sandhagen hasn't faced during his UFC run, so you gotta tip the cap to the Sandman for fighting the best of the best almost every time. And he's probably the most sophisticated striker in the UFC. There's so many layers to that striking game when you consider the movement, the accuracy, shot selection, timing, how he sets traps, how he can throw any and every strike, whether that's a flying knee or a wheel kick, and plus the sheer output has never been a problem. He's never been outlanded on the numbers outside of the Aljamain Sterling fight. And he's not one-dimensional. He can grapple as well. We saw him basically beat Rob Font with one arm because he was leaning on his wrestling. So there's a lot to like about Cory Sandhagen, who still appears to be getting better. And he'll have to be getting better. He'll have to be better than he's ever been because he's facing Umar Nurmagomedov this week. 17 men have tried and all have failed. Umar Nurmagomedov has been dominant in the UFC, and before that, you could actually argue that the best win of his career hasn't even happened in the UFC yet. In the PFL, he has a win over Said Yakub Kakramanov, and the streets don't forget about Kakramanov. So that's, to me, his best win so far. If he beats Cory Sandhagen, of course, that will take the spot. But no one's had an answer for Nurmagomedov's grappling, and that's something the MMA world has said for over a decade now. So it's hard not to like Umar in this one. The pedigree, the preparation, the lack of damage sustained, the grappling advantage in this one. And we've seen Sandhagen taken down before by Rob Font, Song Yadong, Aljo, TJ Dillashaw, and there are even more examples of guys who have gotten Sandhagen to the mat, which is the scariest part of this fight if you're looking to back the Sandman this week. Umar Nurmagomedov is the best grappler he's seen in his career outside of maybe Aljamain Sterling. Not ready to say that Umar's better than Aljo when it comes to the MMA grappling, but he might be. And if he is, he's going to find Sandhagen's back and he's going to win with a rear naked choke. And that Khabib team's game planning is about as good as anybody in the sport right now, second to maybe the fighting nerds who look unstoppable. So they can look at what's worked against Sandhagen as far as the wrestling goes and then find the spot that they're looking for. Now, where I struggle with this one though, if Umar Nurmagomedov doesn't submit Cory Sandhagen in the first or second round of this fight, then how is he supposed to win? Is he supposed to win by controlling him on the mat for a majority of the minutes of these rounds after that point? That's way easier said than done. The examples that I just gave you, the guys that were able to take him down, one thing that a lot of people struggle with is holding Cory Sandhagen down. Holding the Sandman down is like dodging raindrops. You might be doing it for a second, but before too long, inevitably you're going to get wet, which leads me to believe that there will be a lot more striking in this fight than what we're used to seeing out of Nurmagomedov, and the striking exchanges will be competitive for sure, but that's where Cory Sandhagen does his best work, and that's where he'll win minutes. On top of that, Umar Nurmagomedov's never gone 5 rounds. Cory Sandhagen lives for 5 rounds. And lastly, if you look at Umar Nurmagomedov's run in the UFC, Sergey Morozov, who I don't think fights anymore, Brian Kelleher, who's 35 years old at the time and now is on a 4-fight losing streak out of the UFC, Nate Maness, a guy who moved down to flyweight and is not in the UFC anymore, Raoni Barcelos, who's 2-4 in his last 6, and most recently Bekzat Almakhan, who was making his UFC debut on short notice. So since this is a massive step up in competition in a 5-round fight against one of the best talents in the weight class, I gotta go with the dog. I think that Cory Sandhagen gets it done. I think that he pieces him up along the outside, gives him looks that he's never seen before, looks that they can't emulate in the training room on the feet. So if Umar Nurmagomedov can't keep him down, he's going to have problems. I think Cory Sandhagen wins this fight by decision. Next, we have a fight between Shara Bullet Magomedov. He's fighting Lord Michal Oleksiejczuk. Great names, great names. At first glance, I thought I had this fight all figured out. I thought the angle was so clear and obvious, but we always got to do the work to make sure we feel good about the pick. So when I go back and rewatch a few fights, the pick for me changed. Let me explain my thought process real quick. I see the fight get announced. I don't really think anything of it, but as the fight gets a bit closer, I start to look at it and I think Lord Michal's probably going to knock this guy out. Heavy-handed, aggressive, aggressive, can put anybody's lights out at middleweight, especially against a guy in Shara who's got one eye that's essentially a bowl of milk and the other is looking wherever it wants. In my mind, I could see Michal Oleksiejczuk walking him down, letting his hands go, because Shara gives up a lot of ground. You look at his most recent fight, he's given up a lot of ground against Antonio Trocoli, but when you watch the fight back, you realize that it makes sense. He's given up this ground because Trocoli's way taller, way longer, so closing the distance in that one is tough in the early going, and he had to play a lot of defense in the clinch in that fight. Even against Bruno Silva, for that first round, Silva was on the front foot for a lot of the first round. He was also able to secure takedowns, so we saw a lot of retreating, at least in round 1 from Shara, and I think if you start backing up against a guy like Michal Oleksiejczuk, you're going to have problems. You need to take the fight to him, you need to take him down. So is Shara going to be moving back the way that he typically does in this fight? I'm not sure, because in Michal Oleksiejczuk, he doesn't need to worry about the clinch like at all. He definitely doesn't need to worry about takedowns. He's dealing with a one-dimensional striker who's not as athletic, 7-6 in the promotion. I think you can give Shara a pass for moving backward against the guys that he has been so far, but I think this week he's on the gas. But even if he doesn't do that, he fights well moving backwards. He's super fast. He throws some of the best kicks in the division, if not the best kicks in the division right now. That lower half is crazy active. He might even be busier with the kicking than he is with his hands, which is a big separator in this fight because Oleksiejczuk's not going to be throwing any kicks. He's got that boxing heavy approach, and I see him getting chewed up to the body and to the legs. And I think as the fight goes on, I think Shara's going to get more and more confident. He's going to land at a higher clip. The dude's super accurate as well, so I think that he's just going to pick Michal Oleksiejczuk apart. This should be an easy one for Shara, who's going to break him down and close him out, I would say, after the first round. Give me Shara Magomedov to win this fight by knockout. And real quick, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, let me know how you did last week. Remember the name. Next, we have a fight between Marlon Vera and Deiveson Figueredo. Interesting fight at 135 pounds. Cheeto is coming off of that battering against Sean O'Malley. Similar to the Cory Sandhagen fight, the speed and the output from the champ just look like it froze Vera in there. And guys who can put volume on him, use their movement to confuse him a bit, I think that they're going to get over on him basically every time at this point. He's got good enough durability to take the heavy shots, but they're going to have his number. Now, on the flip side, if you can't do that, you're going to struggle with the power. Dominic Cruz, pace, movement, couldn't handle the power. Rob Font, strong pace, couldn't handle the power. Frankie Edgar, same thing. And you look at his fight recently against Pedro Munoz, he threw a lot of volume, and that's the biggest knock on Cheeto, is that he doesn't throw enough. He doesn't let his hands go. But when he does decide to strike, he's one of the more devastating guys in the division. Now, on the other side, Deiveson Figueiredo's looked great at bantamweight. The former flyweight champion is now 2-0 since moving up with wins over Rob Font, Cody No Love, leaned on his wrestling in both of those fights, and he will surely be the better wrestler in this one. You look at the fight between Jose Aldo and Cheeto Vera, Aldo was able to get the win by controlling Cheeto on the mat for a lot of that fight, getting to his back, riding out position. I could see Deiveson Figueiredo doing a lot of the same. Because on the feet, he can't hang with Marlon Vera. I'm telling you now, Cheeto has an all-time chin. He's going to look huge in there compared to Figueiredo, who's the smallest guy he's faced in the UFC and maybe even beyond that. This fight comes down to if Marlon Vera is going to be able to stuff the takedowns or not. If he can't stuff the takedowns, will he get back to his feet? Will he threaten submissions if he is taken down? I think he could do all these things. I actually really like the size advantage. I like the knees and the front kicks that are going to be thrown up the middle or down the middle, however you want to look at it. If you got inverted controls, those kind of techniques that will deter takedown attempts. And Cheeto's nasty in that clinch as well, with those short shots like elbows and knees and short punches in tight that split guys open. And I think the price is nice too. This is kind of a buy low spot for Marlon Vera, and I think the only way he loses this fight is by a boring decision with a lot of control. But when the fight is standing, I see him landing on Figueiredo with ease. I see him landing heavier shots than the former champion is, and I think he's going to land on Figueiredo, and we're going to see big reactions because Figueiredo's never fought somebody with this much power. So give me the younger man, the bigger man, the better striker. Give me Marlon Cheeto Vera to win this fight by decision. Next, we have a fight between Tony Ferguson and Michael Chiesa. This has got to be the last time we see El Cucuy in action, right? 7-fight losing streak, 40 years old, lots of damage, injuries, long career of wars and training. There's only so much the body can take, even if you are a madman. And he hasn't looked good in extended minutes inside of a fight in years. And he's had moments here and there, but eventually he ends up in the same spot on his back with no answers. And in this fight, he's going to be dealing with a bigger guy up at welterweight. He's going to be a lot physically stronger. He's going to be taking Tony down each round. Now, for Michael Chiesa, how could he be a -600 favorite against anyone? Seems criminal, frankly, and you should have a Tony Ferguson by submission bet locked and loaded and ready ready to go because of the value. Because Michael Chiesa puts his neck out there like he's trying to get you a job way more often than he should. So if there's any ounce of magic left, if there is a single second on the Tony time clock, if the Darce Knight will rise one more time, then this is going to be an all-time moment for UFC fans because he submits Michael Chiesa. And it's not even about Michael Chiesa being in there. It's about snapping a 7-fight losing streak at 40 years old. And I think that if anybody can do it, it's Tony Ferguson. And you look at Michael Chiesa's losses, he lost 7 times in the UFC, 5 times by submission. 3 of those were Darce chokes. He was Darced by Jorge Masvidal once upon a time, Kevin Holland in his last fight, Vicente Luque hit it on him 3 fights ago, and Michael Chiesa hasn't won a fight in over 3.5 years. Now, they've both fought stiff competition, but if you just think for a second, because it's not impossible to imagine, Michael Chiesa used to fight at 155. You drop him in there with some of the guys that Tony's been matched up with in recent memory, and you've got guys like Justin Gaethje, Charles DuBronx, Michael Chandler, hell, even Paddy Pimblett. You look at those fights, he's getting barbecued. And lastly, if you look at that fight against Kevin Holland, Michael Chiesa was looking tired just minutes into the first round. And I posted this on Twitter. If you don't follow me on Twitter, go follow me on Twitter. I made a list of I don't know how many unranked welterweights, but there are a lot of them. When you look at the welterweight rankings, Tony Ferguson's not beating anybody in the top 15. As far as unranked welterweights go, there are still a lot of savages that are not ranked at 170 pounds. But when you start looking through the list, the only name that looks like a winnable fight for Tony Ferguson at this stage in his career is Michael Chiesa because of his poor submission defense. That looks like the only guy that he can beat on that entire list. So for Michael Chiesa to be minus 600 feels absurd. So one last time, baby. Sending you that energy, Tony. Grab a flashlight, look under the bed, go find El Kukui for me. I'm taking Tony Ferguson to win this fight by submission. And if you want a place to get action down on Tony Ferguson, you can visit today's sponsor, which is XBet. This is what the main menu looks like. If we look here, Tony Ferguson is plus 320 right there. And if you wait a little while for the props to drop, you can grab Tony Ferguson by submission, which I assume is going to be closer to plus 400, plus 500, which is probably his only winning condition. So if you wanted to wait for the prop to drop, grab Tony Ferguson by submission, you could do it here at XBet. Just another place for you to be able to get some action down, line shop, things like that. And before you go, oh, he's promoting a sports book and he's telling me to pick Tony Ferguson, he's a double agent. Listen, Junior, they've sponsored the last 2 videos, and the bets that I've given you in these videos were Steve Garcia, Sung Woo Choi under a round and a half, hitting at minus 195, and Bobby Green, Paddy Pimblett under 2.5 rounds at plus 135 that some of you guys were belly aching about in the comments, and that hit as well. So how can I be a double agent if I'm hitting? So if you want a piece of the action, you want that deposit bonus, you want that juicy plus 320 line on Tony Ferguson, you could visit the link in the description. It'll take you right over to XBet where you can make an account. In this next fight, we have Mackenzie Dern fighting Lupita Godinez. I completely disagree with the betting line in this one. I was surprised to see Mackenzie Dern coming in as a favorite because I really can't justify it. If you want to say she has better jiu-jitsu, that's fine, but outside of that, Loopy does everything better than she does. She's a better striker with cleaner, tighter boxing, better wrestler offensively and defensively, and she gets to train with the champ in Alexa Grasso. And even though Mackenzie Dern's only 31, I think we've seen the best version of her, while we have yet to see the best version of Loopy Godinez. And if we start looking at recent performances from the two, Mackenzie Dern lost the fight against Tecia Torres, which shows us a split decision win for her, but like we talked about last week, we're going to start calling these for what they are because we live in the real world. So with the loss to Tecia Torres, and you look at these other fights, she's 1-5 in her last 6, and you can argue she's fighting really strong competition, and that's fine. But at 28 to 31 years old, when she's coming in here fighting in her prime, she just hasn't shown up. Going 1-5 during that stretch, no matter who you're fighting, if you're a serious contender in the division, not a good look. The Angela Hill win, super impressive, especially over 5 rounds, but outside of that, she hasn't looked good. And to be as decorated of a grappler as she is, she's gotten these fights where she wants them, on the mat. She doesn't have submission wins, and I know she's won by submission in the UFC in the past, but she doesn't have wins over anybody who's still in the promotion. So maybe it's gotten to the point where there's enough tape on Mackenzie Dern where her grappling's not going to get it done, or maybe she's just fighting better fighters who are just as good of MMA grapplers as she is. And for Lupita Godinez, she's never been finished. She was fighting off submission attempts against Verna Jandiroba, and we just saw Verna cut through Amanda Lemos better than anybody. We saw Verna Jandiroba go 2 for 9 on takedown attempts against Loopy. We saw Tabitha Ricci go 0 for 6 6 on takedown attempts against Loopy, and you can argue that both of those women are more proven MMA wrestlers than Mackenzie Dern. So I expect Loopy to keep this fight where she needs it this week. I expect her to box Dern up over 3 rounds, keep her back off the cage, and give us a strong 3-round performance. Give me the underdog in this fight. Give me Lupita Godinez to win by decision. Next, we have a fight between Yoel Alvarez fighting Elves Brener this week. Interesting clash of style because for Brener, he's never been finished before. Alvarez has a 100% finish rate. An unstoppable force meets an immovable object in this one. Now, you got Brener coming off of a loss to Mike Tebek Oralby last time out. He was really just a step behind in that fight, and he had moments, but the pace, pressure, and wrestling from Oralby was just too much. And on top of that, Brener was eating some big shots. He fights like a guy who's never been finished before. He believes in that chin because it hasn't failed him yet, but that's not a recipe for success long term. Now, will that chin fail him this week? I would say probably not, because Yoel Alvarez is not a knockout artist, but he is one of the bigger submission threats against any and everybody he competes against. And you can argue that Elves Brener does train with the best submission threat in the world, so he maybe should be safe in this one. Possibly. I feel like if you're rolling with Charles Dubronx every week, you should be good money if the fight hits the mat. And he's probably getting some good rounds, not only striking but grappling as well with Ian Gary. Ian Gary can give him some pretty good looks. He's also 6'3", slender, just like Yoel Alvarez. Not as long of reach, but a similar kind of build. So I actually like the preparation coming from Brener this week. I think it should serve him pretty well. On top of that, Alvarez is so confident in his jiu-jitsu that he just lets guys take him down. He's rocking an 11% takedown defense through 7 UFC fights. It's not good. So if Brener wants to get a takedown in this fight, he's going to have no problem in doing so. It's just a matter of if he can stay safe on top. And I think that he can, fighting off submissions, trying not to get swept. As far as the fight goes striking, Alvarez is a lot taller, a lot longer, but the power from Brener is definitely the equalizer here. I think he's going to fight better late. I think we could see Alvarez playing some tall guy defense, and I think Brenner's going to crack him with a big reaching right hand. So while I like a lot of what Joel Alvarez brings to the table, he's a bad matchup for a lot of guys in the division, but I think the toughness coming from Brener, the ability to push the strong pace throughout all 3 rounds, and the power that he carries in his hands, plus the training situation that he's in, I like him to win this one. I think the price is nice. I think he breaks Alvarez in this one. Give me Elves Brener to win by knockout, probably after the first round. And you might find Elves Brener on the official betting article on KunithMMA.com this week. Last week, the betting article smashed once again. The best bets of the week were Sean Bannon, going a bit heavier there. The under 1.5 rounds for Tom Aspinall and Curtis Blades was the easiest button you would click all week, and minus, or plus in this case, 5.5 for Bilal Mohammad, who just took it to him. 14 units in, over 20 units out. Great day, back-to-back very strong weeks. We almost had the prop of the week too with Modestas Bukauskas by knockout. The props of the week, they get so close and then something happens. Should have just took his points. We got that finish in the 3rd round, but nevertheless, we came out on top once again last week. A couple of strong performances that we're stringing together. So if you don't want to miss out on these, you could visit KunithMMA.com, go to plans, get yourself a total access package. That's going to give you the official betting article, the DFS strategy guide, lineup optimizer, data model, projections, things like that. Access to the community tab that is slowly but surely getting bigger and better each and every week. And if you want some free content, you can go there, put your information in, sign up for the website without having to pay for anything. You'll get your prop of the week email, and this week we will hit it because we're due. But all of that can be found on KunithMMA.com, linked in the description and in a pinned comment. Back to the breakdown. Next, we have a light heavyweight fight between Alonzo Menifield and Azamat Murzakanov. If you've watched this channel for a while, you know I am somebody who is not afraid to give Alonzo Menifield his flowers. The dude is a beast, and he's only improved since coming into the UFC. Just raw, green athleticism that's been molded into a complete mixed martial artist, and he's done well for himself in the UFC. He's had ups and downs, yes, but he's kept a roster spot, produced some really big moments, faced really good fighters throughout his run, and this week is no different. He's going to be dealing with a very good fighter here with undefeated Azamat Murzakanov, 3-0 in the UFC. Murzakanov, serious power as well. He's recorded a knockdown in each of his UFC fights and on his Contender Series fight that got him the contract to go into the UFC. He can fight well from behind. We saw him come back from behind to beat Tafan Chukwi, flying knee in the 3rd round, put him out. We saw him break down Devin Clark before closing him out in the 3rd round. We saw him put hands all over Dustin Jacoby to get to a decision win. And now in this fight specifically, Alonzo Menifield does have the size advantage. He's going to be a bit taller. He's going to be significantly longer, but I do like the striking from Murzakanov Murzakanov and the power to go along with it. Alonzo Menifield was just knocked out in 12 seconds 2 months ago. And that was against Carlos Olberg, who's one of the best fighters in the division. It's going to happen, but he's been dropped and hurt with punches before and outside of that fight, so I could see Murzakanov doing the same thing. I like the hand speed from the Russian. I think that Alonzo Menifield at this point does a good job of throwing things down the middle, but I think that's going to open up opportunities for Murzakanov to slip and rip, and he's going to catch him with that a couple of times for however long this fight lasts, and I think he gets him out of there late. Give me Azamat Murzakanov to win this fight by knockout. Next, we have a fight where the betting line has been absurd, with swung super heavy toward the Brazilian. We've got Muhammad Yahya fighting Kaue Fernandes. Both these guys lost their UFC debuts largely for the same reason. They were out wrestled and they were outworked, but Muhammad Yahya was out wrestled by Trevor Peek, which is not something any of us saw coming because it's not Trevor Peek's game. But Fernandes, we have seen guys lose to Mark Diakese in that way in the UFC before. So both these guys underperformed last time out. A lot of that has to probably do with them making their debut in the UFC, but now that that's out of the way, I think we get better effort from each guy. But the clear side in this one is Fernandes. He's got better experience. If you look at the guys that Muhammad Yahya has beaten, they are awful. Fernandes is fighting out of a better camp. He's the better grappler in this fight. If Trevor Peek can do it, I think that Fernandes can. So I expect him to make it look easy in this one, control the fight really wherever it goes, and win on the judges' scorecards, even though they're fighting where they're fighting, which I never think they should be fighting there ever again, but that's neither here nor there. Give me Kaue Fernandes to win this fight by decision. Next, we have a fight between Shamil Gaziev fighting Don'Tale Mayes. Shamil. Pretended he couldn't see last time out against Biggie Boy because he was getting pieced up and gassed out early in that fight. Threw in the towel. Tough scenes, but hey, he went from undefeated to having that fight. First main event, 5 rounds against a seasoned veteran. If anything, he learned a bit about himself in the MMA game during that 20 minutes of fisticuffs. Fine. Before that, he was on a tear, and I could see him getting back to his winning ways this week because Don'Tale Mayes really doesn't have much for him. I give the edge in boxing to Gaziev, the same with the grappling. I think Mayes could have success if he were fighting behind a jab and using his length, but he doesn't really do that. For someone who's as big as he doesn't really use the physical tools that he's been given as best as he can. He jumps into the pocket, his hands are really high up, kind of closes his eyes sometimes, it seems. Just a mess of a situation for him. I think that Don'Tale Mayes really struggles in this one wherever the fight goes, but especially if Gaziev decides to grapple. If Gaziev can secure a takedown, it's a wrap. And I do think that he goes submission hunting here this week. I think that he's going to get on top of him, stay very heavy. I think that Mayes is a turtle on his back, and I think Shamil, fighting out of a good gym, is going to put together a solid game plan rather than dealing with the length and giving Don'Tale Mayes that puncher's chance. I expect Gaziev to get takedowns, find the back, find the rear naked choke. Give me Shamil to win this fight by submission. Next, we have a fight between Guram Kutateladze. He's fighting Jordan Vucenic this week. Vucenic making his UFC debut just 2 weeks removed from a win on Cage Warriors. The guy that he beat was not good at all, and a lot of the guys that he's beaten recently are not very good, but he does have some solid wins on his record. So the guy's good, and he probably would have found himself in the UFC at some point anyway, but this week it's too much. Guram is solid, and he's really starving for that first solid UFC victory. He gassed out chasing a finish over Elves. Brener paid for it late in that fight. Went back-to-back on split decisions against very tough guys like Ismagulov and Gamrot. He's super talented, and he's been against very stiff competition, so you can argue that this is the easiest matchup that he's seen since coming into the promotion. And that's not to say that Vucenic is a bum or anything like that, because he's not. He's very good, but Guram has been looking at this date, coming into this fight in great shape, wanting to win cleanly. He's probably going to do that on the scorecards, being fast, sharp, entertaining. Give me Guram Kutateladze to win this fight by decision. Next, we have a fight between Victoria Dudakova. She's fighting Sam Hughes. I appreciate that the line's not outrageous because it's easy to go with the 25-year-old undefeated prospect against somebody who's got a near 500 record, but Dudakova is somewhat untested, really. Sam Hughes can bring a tough fight if you start to fade, if she gets her wrestling going, and she is super durable, so I don't expect Dudakova to blow the doors off her and finish her in like the first round or anything like that. I do, however, expect Dudakova to do a good job of landing better strikes at range. I think in the clinch it's not as clear. Sam Hughes might be getting takedowns, might be making her work, but I wouldn't be shocked to see the Russian stuff takedowns, reverse position in the clinch, press Hughes up against the cage. And at this stage, I really can't trust Sam Hughes coming into this fight, where if she loses, she's going to have an 8-7 record and probably won't be in the UFC anymore. So I'll take the younger fighter, the longer fighter, the one who hasn't lost, the one who's taken less damage. I think she stays undefeated. Give me Victoria Dudakova to win this fight by decision. Next, we have a fight between Jai Herbert fighting Rolando Bedoya. This is absurd. How in God's name is Jai Herbert favored to win this fight? I don't understand. He's got 2 wins in 6 UFC fights. He's been knocked out twice, submitted in the UFC. He hasn't had an impressive run to me at all. I'm not moved by a comma-worthy knockout one bit, nor the Kyle Nelson decision win. And when you look at the numbers side by side, even though Rolando Bedoya has not won a fight in the UFC yet, they are staggering. First would be the age. Bedoya's 27, and he's been fighting at welterweight for years now. Jai Herbert's 36, and a career lightweight moving up to 170 for the first time. On paper, Jai Herbert lands 2.69 significant strikes per minute and has never landed more than 50 significant strikes in a UFC fight. Rolando Bedoya lands 8.7 significant strikes per minute and has landed nearly 50 strikes inside of rounds in the UFC. Herbert lands strikes at 41%, Bedoya lands strikes at 55%. Herbert defends strikes at 45%, Bedoya defends strikes at 52%. Herbert has a negative striking differential, Bedoya has a positive striking differential. Herbert's been finished 4 times as a pro, Bedoya doesn't even have 4 losses on his record and has never been finished. So this has got to be my favorite underdog of the card. The line just seems off, so cash in. If you see it differently, please let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. I would love to know, but the pick for me in this one is going to be Rolando Bedoya to win this fight by decision. And our last fight, which is opening the card, Shadrikas Dumas fighting Denis Talulin. If you haven't, like the video, subscribe, comment, yada yada. This is the last fight that we're looking at, and the line again is a bit shocking just because I think that Shadrikas Dumas is not only the rightful favorite, but I think he should be a bigger favorite than he is. Denis Talulin is not UFC caliber. The guy can't grapple. He looks like he's never grappled a day in his life. His record is 11-9. I'm not sure how he's still on the roster. And I think Dumas makes it look easy this week. I think he should go out there and submit Talulin with little to no resistance. I feel that Dumas and his team know with who he is, what the public perception is of him. He needs to win. Like, he needs to win fights in the UFC. He's not going to be somebody who they'll just keep on the roster like a Denis Talulin, like, oh, you lost a handful, whatever, you can keep fighting, you're exciting enough. No, I think Shadrikas Dumas absolutely needs to go out there and win these fights, so I don't think he's going to waste any time. I think he's going to take the clearest and most obvious path to victory here, take Denis Talulin down, submit him early. I think he does it in 1. Give me Shadrikas Dumas to win this fight by submission. And if you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, and I'll see you later in the week for final picks. Let's go.